So today I wanted to talk to you about the concept of property division and this idea of, does my wife really get half in the divorce case? And are there strategies that can help me avoid having to lose half of my property in a divorce? So one possibility, of course, is whether there's a prenuptial agreement. If there's a prenuptial agreement, that's something, depending on the agreement, should be enforceable, and you'd be good to go on that. If that doesn't exist, which is more typical, then you're looking at, how do we divide property in a divorce? Well, the factors on dividing property involve looking at, first of all, Michigan is a dual property state. So what that means is you really divide property into two categories: marital property and separate property. So separate property is one of the places where we can have a hope of not having to divide half the property with your wife in a divorce case. So, for example, let's say you owned a vehicle before you got married and now you're getting divorced. It's possible to say, well, that entire vehicle is mine and I don't owe my wife half the value of that vehicle or anything to do with it. Or maybe I owned a house before we got married. Same theory. It's possible to claim that the house is separate property or the bank account is separate property, whatever it might be that I owned prior to the marriage. Premarital property could then be mine and not have to be divided with my wife. Now, of course, there are exceptions, and the longer you've been married can have an effect on this, and also the type of asset can have an effect on this. So houses, for example, get much more complicated than, say, a bank account that is in your separate name and has been in your separate name since prior to the marriage. A bank account that's been separate since prior to the marriage has a high likelihood of being separate at the time of the divorce, and you can keep it segregated and not have to share part of that account with your wife. A house, of course, is looked at differently. You make payments to it, you do work, you do upkeep, whatever is being done, so that changes and makes it a little more confusing. But in general, we've got separate property and marital property, which is why Michigan is known as a dual property state. So marital property is anything that's acquired during the marriage. So you buy a business, you buy a house, you buy a vehicle, you save money, you put money in retirement, whatever it might be. Those assets are typically going to be divided equally in a divorce case, and those all fall under the category of marital property. So in general, we're looking at our analysis of, is there separate property, like a gift, an inheritance, something I owned prior to the marriage, or is this marital property, which is something we acquired during the marriage? That's the start on our analysis of how to divide up property in a divorce case. So, hope that helps.